Good afternoon, class. We're going to start our first chapter of um, the, the text, or at least the class where we're going to talk about strategic management. And this is the text we're going to use, Mastering Strategic Management. It's by Ketchen and Short, produced by Flat World Publishing. And in the syllabus, you've got a link that will get you to Flat World Publishing if you'd like to purchase the text. It's purchasing text, as I said in the syllabus, is not mandatory, but I think it's actually a pretty good text. And while these two individuals are academics, they actually have a lot of publications between the two of them, a lot of books and journal articles, and they seem to have a really good grasp on strategic management. May not have the operational experience that some textbook publisher, some textbook writers have, but I think they do a pretty good job, for at least from what I can see so far, in outlining and providing concepts that are going to be beneficial when we're talking about strategic management. Again, Ketchen and Short, both academics. I tend to, at least historically, sometimes disagree with academics as they move forward within the information they provide. And when I do see something that I question, I'll be sure to bring it forward. And we're going to start on chapter 1. And the first chapter talks about mastering strategy and talking about it being an art and a science. And it is, from my perspective, it's an art and a science. It's you looking at the information before you, being able to understand, analyze the information, and then you've got sometimes you're trying to develop strategies based on your gut feel. So it's a combination of information, combination of gut feel, combination of input that you get from others. Most of my career has been in healthcare, especially on the health plan side, so more on the payer side than on the provider side. But still, when you're looking at how to develop benefit plans and what the strategy is going to be to sell those benefit plans to employer groups, and how you're going to develop the data warehouse and the informational structure, and the data structure, and the data repositories that are going to drive those strategic plans, it gets extremely complicated. And sometimes, as I've found myself in the past, looking at the information, and while the information tells you one thing, you've got kind of just a feeling about the situation or the environment that you're working in. And it takes a combination of those two to develop a strategic plan and to move it forward and to get buy-in, especially from those in your organization. And again, they talk about mastering strategy is an art and part science. It's a complex concept. It's got many different processes and activities, and especially when you're trying to develop that strategic plan. The one thing that some plans that I've seen in the past, or I've inherited in the past, as I move from one job to the next within the same organization, or even as I switch organizations from time to time, is that a lot of strategic plans lack, I guess I'll call it an evaluation component, lack a definitive set of metrics, or you hear talking heads on TV, or you hear economists, or you see written in articles that talk about KPIs, key performance indicators, especially if you're working with a consulting group. They'll continually talk about, well, here's the KPIs we need to manage to, and here's how we're going to structure them. And those are definitely important when you're developing your strategic plan. And as the authors move through this first chapter, they talk about Henry Metzberg, who was at McGill University, and he developed what's considered the 5 Ps of strategy. And academics, especially individuals trying to publish journal articles, trying to I guess, write text that will be readily accepted in the academic fields, they tend to try to put little nuances together, little snappy sayings together, try to tie things together so that individuals that are trying to use that text or trying to use those journal articles will actually help them to remember. And I think this could be why Metzberg comes up with the 5 P's of strategy, because they're plan, ploy, pattern, position, and perspective. And if you've had any other strategic management or strategy development classes or seminars or read about it on, your local, picked up a book at your local Barnes and Noble or searched on Google and found some information, these may be somewhat familiar to you. You may have not seen them phrased in this way, but it's a kind of catchy, and it does a pretty good job. The 5 Ps do a pretty good job in trying to map out how you should develop a strategic plan and how you use the plan. And again, we'll get into that as we move through chapters in the text. And the authors talk about strategic management, and it examines how activities and events involving top executives, and they like to use Elon Musk, and I'd say, Elon Musk is as good an example as anybody, firms, which is Tesla, and industries, which is the auto market, influence a company's success or failure. Individuals may like Elon Musk, or they may dislike him, and to me that's irrelevant. It's more about, I'm not so concerned about his personal attributes as I am his business acumen, because if he can take and make Tesla a success, or he can purchase Twitter and rename it X or whatever it's called now and make those a success, he must be a fairly successful businessman. And as you're working through this, I think, at least from my perspective, that's what really defines success or failure of a strategic plan, or your strategic planning process, is how successful you are at the end of whatever that time period. And again, working health plans, we would typically have a 1-year strategic plan, a 3-year strategic plan, and then maybe a 5-year strategic plan. And you're trying to combine those, over that time horizon. I have seen some health plans that, just looked at 1 year, 2 year, 3 year. But typically, most successful executives are simultaneously developing strategies, developing a vision in the short run, and also developing that vision in the long run. So develop a short run vision, develop the strategy to attain that short run vision, and at the same time, trying to stay 2 steps ahead so that you can take that vision in the short run and apply it 2 or 3 steps ahead in the long run. Because the key to developing a strategic plan, and the rationale of developing one and actually following and having one that's going to be successful, is how can you, as a leader of an organization or as a leader of a functional area within an organization, continue to be competitive, especially from an organizational perspective. How can you continue to be competitive over the long haul? And that takes, from my perspective, some combination of a short-run strategy in conjunction with a long-run strategy. And the first P that the authors talk about was plan, and it says the definition they give you is a carefully crafted set of steps that a firm intends to follow in order to be successful. And again, from a healthcare perspective, we would always start in usually late September, early October, and you'd start working on what you knew where you were in the current year. You had an idea where you wanted to be in the next year, and then what you were doing, where you were starting to develop in late fall, starting to develop your strategic plan for the next year. And the goal was to have that plan formalized, have it rolled out to review by what they call the C-suite or the senior management of the company that you worked with, so that you could hit the ground running with it in January of the next year. So that was kind of the process that a lot of firms work through. The one thing that then we'll get into it a little later on is what you do with that strategic plan once you get it developed and once you roll it out. The second P is ploy, a specific move designed to outwit or outtrick or trick competitors. And you see this, from my perspective, you see it a lot in fast food. You've got all of these fast food vendors, they're coming up with new ideas. They're trying to, to design something that's going to trick or outwit the competitors. And they're talking about rolling it out, and you hope that your competitors see it and they try to jump in there ahead of you and roll it out. But a lot of times a ploy is along the lines of you're just trying to influence your competitors and hopefully influence them in a way that they would adjust and develop a strategy based on information that they think they have gleaned from you or stolen from you one way or the other. And you hope that it sends them down a rabbit hole that they can't get back out of. And I've seen it, again, a lot in fast food. You see it in healthcare, especially on the health plan side, because every year health plans start usually in July timeframe, and they start developing the pricing model that they are going to roll out for the new benefit plans that are going to take place on January the 1st of the next year. So health plans that were rolling out new benefit plans in January the 1st of 2024 started working on them probably May, June, July of 2023. And what you will see sometimes with health plans, and I've witnessed it on a couple of occasions in the past, is they will leak information in an area where things are extremely competitive, and they will leak information about what they're going to do, what's going to happen, how they're going to try to corner the market, how they're going to try to drive competition, and they're going to leak false information, hoping that somebody picks up on the information, takes it to the competitors, and the competitors decide, well, for me to stay competitive, I'm going to roll that out too. So that's what we're talking about when we're talking about ploy. And we'll get into that again a little deeper in detail. Pattern, the degree of consistency in a firm's strategic actions. Patterns can be good. Sometimes patterns can be bad. If you've been extremely successful as a firm, patterns are a great thing. They worked for you in the past, and you will continue to use those patterns or those types of strategies when you're developing your strategic plan. The only downside to it is if your competitors pick up on the fact that you're developing patterns over time, they might use those patterns to leverage their competitive nature when it comes to a particular market. Position, a firm's place in the industry relative to its competitors. Let's go back to fast food. McDonald's been for years kingpin, top dog in fast food industry. I can remember a time in probably the early 70s, there was another competitor on the market that would, giving McDonald's all they could handle. It was an outfit called Burger Chef. And it similar concept as McDonald's, burgers, fries. I think they had some milkshakes maybe, but they were giving McDonald's all they could handle. And not only from a competitive nature, but they were developing fast food restaurants and the numbers were increasing. And somewhere along the way, they ended up being acquired by another fast food chain. And at that point, the wheels just completely fell off. People will argue that in today's market that Subway is a direct competitor to McDonald's, and pushing McDonald's I don't want to say out of the market, but providing a value for your money and at least an alternative to McDonald's burgers and fries and chicken sandwiches. So that's what we're talking about when we're talking about position. How do you gain that position as the leader in a market economy? And more importantly, how do you maintain that position? And then lastly, on the 5 Ps, where they're going to talk about perspective, how executives interpret the competitive landscape around them. And this may, I don't want to say it's the most important, but it is significant in how the leaders of a company, whether it's your company, one that you developed, or whether it's a company that you work for, how is the information in the competitive, has the competitive nature of the information and the landscape around you going to be viewed, and how are you going to use that information? Before we break, or before we take our first break, we'll jump into strategy as a plan and get a little more detail on it. And the authors talk about strategic plans are the essence of strategy itself. That's, I don't want to say it's a no-brainer, but that seems pretty straightforward. Strategic plan is a carefully crafted set of steps that a company intends to follow to be successful. Again, pretty straightforward. Probably heard it multitude of times over the years, depending on how long you've been. Since this is a graduate class, I'm assuming that several of you have already have your undergraduate degree and are had either already been out in the workforce or getting ready to go out into the workforce. One of the things about a strategic plan, and I'll go back to my healthcare experience, is once you spend, and some people actually thought an inordinate amount of time developing this strategic plan in the fall, ready to roll it out on January the 1st of the next year. And what I'm seeing over the terms that I've had in different health plans is some health plans develop this strategic plan. They have a all hands on deck meeting in December, and it's gung ho, and they're going to roll this thing out. Everybody's excited. They roll it out. Everybody's really looking forward to the new year starting. And then individuals in the organization take that strategic plan, and for whatever reason, they put it on a shelf, never to be pulled off of that shelf until the next year in October, November, when they start to, get all energized and they're going to put their strategic plan together for the next coming year. And I think that's a mistake that a lot of companies run into when it comes to developing their strategic plan and implementing it, is you have to continue to monitor. And I can use an example. Blue Cross Blue Shield of Western New York was the last position I had where you actually went into an office and worked. I'm currently doing consulting now with Carological Consulting Group, but working with Blue Cross Blue Shield. First year I was there, we went through this process. We got our strategic plan together, and we, it was had a huge meeting in December, going to roll it out, and rolled it out. Then first thing I did was, I started there in like September, so I got there just in time to work through all these plans and develop them. But when we rolled it out, first thing I did is I sat down with my team and I said, look, this is our strategic plan. Here's our key performance, our KPIs, or our metrics that we're going to measure to. And my metrics have always been black and white, binary. Either you make it or you don't make it. And we said, we're going to roll these out. I said, but ask how they had in the past have gone about measuring it. And everybody kind of looked at each other, and I don't think they knew what I was talking about. And I said, well, here's what we're going to do. We're going to go through on a monthly basis, and we're going to track these KPIs. We're going to track our metrics. We're going to have a business, a quarterly business review 4 times a year, each quarter, and that's going to give us an idea of where we are and where we're going. And I said, and if we aren't hitting where we need to be and we need to adjust our strategic plan, we're going to do it. And I don't think the group had ever gone through a process where they were adjusting their strategic plan as you went forward. And it was a new concept to them. Some individuals I had to drag kicking and screaming into the process, but it it helped us to make our financial goals and our operational goals in an area where um, over the few years before I got there, they hadn't been able to achieve their goals. And I think that was part of it. They developed their strategic plan for their functional area. They got it blessed by senior management, and they just plopped the thing on the shelf. So if you're ever involved in a situation where you are a key member of working that strategic plan and developing it, always keep it in the back of your mind. Don't develop it, don't implement it, and then put it on the shelf. Always keep monitoring that strategic plan. And if you need to, and we would make our adjustments on a quarterly basis. So Q1 was over in March the 31st of the year, and we usually had that first QBR, that first quarterly business review, down toward the tail end of April, so that we knew kind of where we were at the end of Q1, and we'd start and we'd make adjustments for Q2. And the text or the authors talk about a business model, and it describes a process through which a company hopes to earn profits. Should be a central element of a company's strategic plan. That should make sense on the business model. And the key here is through which a company hopes to earn profits. Go back to your microeconomics classes, and what are the three tenements or the three pillars of economic thought? Opportunity cost, self-interest, and optimization. What's the third one? Decisions at the margin. But the one that's important here is self-interest, optimization. Companies are in business producing goods and services for one reason and one reason only, and that's to make profits. And that's where your business model comes in to help you. It helps you determine what the path needs to be in order for you to make those profits and hopefully to accrue, especially if you're working for a for-profit company and you're traded on the exchange or you have equity investors. You've got to hit those earnings per share, or not only will the senior management of the company be on the street looking for a job, but you may be on the street looking for a new job too. And want to talk, the authors talk for just a few minutes about want to make sure that revenues are greater than expenditures, provide customers with a good or service cheaper than they can make it themselves. And that's a key tenet at that point is you've got to generate or got to produce goods and services that cheaper and higher quality than customers can do it for themselves. That's a key in driving profit for any organization. And at this point, I want to talk just a few minutes about you've got, and it goes back to your micro classes, you've got accounting profits, which is revenues minus explicit cost. And when I say explicit cost, I'm talking about those costs that required an invoice to be paid, a credit card used to pay it off, a check written to a supplier. Those are explicit costs. And if you compare accounting costs to economic costs are revenues minus explicit cost minus implicit cost. And when we talk about implicit cost in economics, we're talking about opportunity cost. Again, one of those three tenets. The first tenet when we're talking about, or the first pillar when we're talking about economic cost or economic thought is your opportunity cost. So here, when we're talking about this strategic plan, we've already gone through opportunity cost. We've already gone through self-interest when we're trying to determine how we're going to drive profits. And then lastly, we're talking about decisions at the margin. And you as a leader in a company or a leader in a functional area within a company, or maybe you're an entrepreneur and you're trying to drive profits on your own business, you're going to be making decisions at the margin. And so you need to develop that type of mentality that you can look at marginal return. Remember, in economics, you keep producing a good or service as long as the marginal return is greater than the marginal cost. You're also going to be looking at marginal product of labor. How much how many new units or how many units will you generate or increase your total units based on hiring an individual unit of labor. So a lot of marginal decisions when you get into working on a strategic plan or working for a company. And again, I don't want I don't want anybody to ever lose sight of that the goal of a firm is profit maximization. And I know I've had students say, well, what about not-for-profit? I can understand that being a for-profit firm, but what about a not-for-profit firm? And to me, not-for-profit is only a tax category. It's the way they file their taxes. It's a tax. I don't say a tax break, but it's driven by tax rules and laws. But trust me, not-for-profit firms have to make money. If they're not making money and making enough profit to hold some in reserve, they're not going to be in business very long. And the text talks about economies of scale. Again, microeconomic concept. A cost advantage created when a company can produce a good or service at a lower per unit price due to producing the good or service in large quantities. Again, remember your long run average cost curve. If you're plotting cost per unit over here on the vertical axis and you're plotting output per period down here on the horizontal axis, your long run average cost, as long as you can stretch that out, your long run average cost is going to continue to decline as you add more and more units, and it's going to decline because you are allocating some of your revenue to cover fixed costs. Remember, it's got when you're talking about long run average cost, there's a fixed cost component to it and there's a variable cost component to it. Just like firms, when it's making a decision to close the doors, they will continue to produce goods and services as long as the long run variable cost is covered. Once that variable cost, you can't cover it, then you have to make a decision on whether you're going to shut the doors. That's going to be extremely important if you, maybe not so much if you go to work for a bigger company or a larger company, because they're going to make that decision for you. But if you're an entrepreneur or trying to start your own business, it's going to be extremely important for you to get a grasp of how that long run average cost curve works. And you're talking about economies of scale. And the authors continue to move forward and they talk about differentiated products. And they say differentiated products are vulnerable to imitation and competition. And that is true. You want to have a product that is unique. And the more unique your product is, or the more unique the concept is, or the more unique the service is, the more difficult it is for other firms, other entrepreneurs to come into the market and steal and drive, and not only steal your profits, but drive down the economic profits that are in that market. And if you look at the continuum of market classifications, on one end of the tail, you've got monopolies. On the other end of the tail, you've got perfect competition. And then in the middle here, you've got oligopolies and you've got monopolistic competition. And again, back to your micro classes, but that's the types of markets that we're looking at. And you as an entrepreneur, if you decide to go the entrepreneurial route, you're going to be having to determine what kind of a market that you're going to be involved in and what type of a market that you're going to have to function within. Uniqueness, that's hard to imitate. That's what you want from a product perspective, and especially if you've ever had a leadership class where they talk about mission and they talk about vision and they talk about culture. It's that culture that you want to be extremely difficult to imitate, because if you've got a culture that's hard to imitate or a product that's hard to imitate, you're going to be functioning more so up in this monopolistic type market, and you're going to be able to set your own prices. You're going to be able to drive your own profits. It's when you get down in perfect competition, when everything is homogeneous and you're playing around there. it's a little more difficult to make things move from there or to drive profits. It's just a little more difficult to drive those profits. And when you talk about uniqueness, you're selling your own profit based on unique technology or you're licensing technology to other firms. And that's I don't want to say it's the best of both worlds, but that would put an entrepreneur in a pretty good situation where they can sell their own product based on a unique technology and at the same time outsource some of that technology to other firms so that way they're drawing revenue from two different types of sources. And then the authors go through and they talk about some things that can kind of disrupt a strategic plan. And they throw a few quotes out. Says, "He who fails to plan plans to fail," and they probably pulled that out of a book, a bazillion quotes, referring to strategic plans. But again, not a bad quote when it comes to strategic plans. And on strategic plans, you want to lay out a path and follow the path. Don't lay out the path and get sidetracked or distracted unless there is some factor in the environment that is driving you to alter your plan as you go forward. Maintaining flexibility is key to success because there are always shocks to the market economy. And that there might not be any more, there probably might not, gracious. There is probably no more realistic piece or nugget of information than they give you than that particular little nugget of information. Maintaining flexibility is key to success. You've always got to be flexible. Think about healthcare. Think about what happened in, get my dates right, late 2019, Q1 of 2020, started seeing some issues with COVID that, trust me, no health plan had in their wildest dreams had ever envisioned something like COVID hitting the market. And full blown by the end of Q1 in 2020. You're talking about something that upset the market economy and something that the majority, I don't think any, and you had some policy makers and some individuals, Fauci and some of the yahoos in the government that were, kind of pitched the story that they'd been expecting this to happen for some time, but to me is, kind of a bunch of junk. But anyway, it really disrupted the healthcare market. Think about what would happen in Napa Valley and Sonoma Valley in California if there was a blight on grapes that came through. Think what happened to them a few years ago when they had those wildfires up there, what it did to the wine industry. But you can see things like that all across market economies, and that's why you have to be flexible, and that's how you have to be able to move and to change direction based on shocks to the market economy. Unexpected economy impacts place limits on a strategic plan, and it does definitely. I'm not sure that there was anything that when COVID was full blown in Q1 of 2020, and I was working payment integrity in Buffalo at the time, and there was nothing we could do with that strategic plan. It was such a shock to the economy. Hospitals overstaffed. Hospitals understaffed. They didn't have room for patients. State of New York decided that if you had an elective surgery, you're going to have to forget about it because there was no hospital room to take care of elective surgery. So basically, individuals, it was emergency admissions, it was, labor and delivery, even behavioral health. And it was a nightmare. And I can remember sitting it with my team, direct reports, and trying to figure out what we were going to do with the strategic plan, because the impact of what we did, the impact of COVID on what we did and our strategic plan, it was there was just nothing that we could really do to make an adjustment strategic plan for that particular year. Not only impacted my functional area within the health plan, but then you started, companies going out of business, companies shutting their doors, laying off people, individuals that, had, employer groups that had purchased healthcare insurance from Blue Cross Blue Shield, go out of business. And, you're talking about, now you're starting to talk about losing membership, and, think of what that would do to the revenue coming into the health plan. So just be careful and try to be as flexible as possible. But it's not uncommon in any given industry for you to run into some kind of a shock to that market economy that will render your strategic plan useless. And then one of the quotes that they give in the book, and I actually kind of like it. It says, "Everyone has a plan until I punch them in the face," and that's attributed to Mike Tyson. And I think that happens. Individuals back in Mike Tyson's heyday, when he was fighting him, yeah, they may have had a strategic plan when they went in and how they were going to beat him, but that strategic plan didn't last very long. Think about football teams, high school, college, professional football teams. They go in and a lot of times they will have the first 12 or 15 plays scripted out. And they go in, script out the first 12, 15 plays based on historically what the opposing team's done. And if you get into a game and your strategic plan is based on historical activities, and all of a sudden the opposing team completely changes the game plan, what does that do to your strategic plan? At that point, they talk about, you hear them talking about coaches, in game, within game adjustments. And that's where you're starting to be flexible, starting to work that strategic plan of those in-game adjustments. And they also talk about adjusting to shifting situations, adjusting to changes in behavior, and things that drive shifting situations. Customers can drive them, competitors can drive them, suppliers, regulators. Think of what the government does with laws and regulations, especially think about what the current federal government's doing with laws and regulations around the energy sector. You've got other external groups that are causing issues. Again, go back to the suppliers. Think of all of the hiccups that occurred during COVID with supply chain management. You had thousands of ships on the Pacific coast that, A, couldn't unload their cargoes, and B, even if they could unload their cargoes, there was no transportation available to get the goods and services from the West Coast to the East Coast. And we all lived through that, and it was not a pleasant experience. But again, changes in the market environment are going to always change your strategic plan. And you have to be flexible, and you have to be creative. When they say flexible, it's not just flexible, it's creative. You have to be creative, and you have to be a quick decision maker, or your not only strategic plan falls apart, but it's a negative impact to the company that you're working for. And we're going to take a quick break here, and when we come back, we'll talk about strategy as a ploy. Thank you.